دنیای واقعی یا دنیای حقیقی.
True world or real world? When we hit this dilemma, which one do we choose? Philosopher or politician? Welcome to the hidden corner of thoughts.
جنگ و تقلا.
War and struggle. These are the most important things that come to mind when discussing history. Many say resources have been the reason for all wars. But once in a while, we have seen wars that were not just for resources. So, what was those wars' reason? The conquerors of history seem to have justified their campaigns behind a single word or a belief. What was it that made the pages of history bloody? This idea is called Utopia. Many monsters in history have used this word to justify their crimes. But there were a few people in history who rose to create that utopia. It is true that these people could never establish that promised utopia, but they were able to form a quasi-utopia. The way to achieve that promised utopia is a 1,000-year mystery. We must travel to the ancient world to discover this secret.
Many believe almost all civilizations are destroyed every 7,777 years. Noah, who had warned of such an event since he was 40, finally witnessed this great event 79 years later, or 948 months later, at the age of 119. At that time, each month was called a year. The survivors of Noah's Ark reached safe shores in various parts of the New World, including South America. These people created the Maya civilization later. But most of them stayed in the Ark until Noah's Ark finally landed in New Havand, known as Nahavand today. 2 years later, Noah died at the age of 121. The survivors of Noah's Ark formed civilizations in the Mesopotamian region, which were derived from the names of Noah's children and descendants. They were Elam, Assyria, Aram, and Canaan. These survivors were scattered throughout the Mesopotamian region. That is why this world region is considered the cradle of civilization. After the destruction of civilizations before the Great Flood, the first urban civilizations were established in Mesopotamia 5,425 years ago. That is why they fought for several thousand years to impose their ideas and prove their legitimacy. but none of them succeeded in building their desired utopia. These attritional warfares lasted so long that almost all these civilizations perished. Only a few civilizations, such as Lydia, Media, and Babylon remained, and the strongest of them was Babylon, which was ruled by a powerful ruler, Nebuchadnezzar III, or Bukhtar-Nas.
یه اتفاق ساده
A simple but significant event completely changed the course of history forever.
In the 6th century BC, the king of a small country called Anshan in the Pars region rose and changed history. His title was Cyrus II. From 550 to 539 BC, Cyrus achieved numerous victories under the successful command of his army. He first fought against the Median kingdom and conquered its capital, Ecbatana. Then he defeated Croesus, the king of Lydia. In the spring of 539 BC, he conquered Babylon without bloodshed. Cyrus the Great defeated all the ancient civilizations, and then created another type of system of government called empire.
اولین امپراتوری جهان که
The
از-
first world empire was stretched from the Indus River in India to Anatolia, which was 3,200 kilometers long. Cyrus also freed enslaved people, including Jews.
All regions were free throughout the territory of the Cyrus Empire, and their followers had the right to practice their religions. He was praised by Marduk and anointed by the God of the Jews. Different religions and ideas all agreed on one single ruler for the first time, which was a pivotal point in history. The era of urban civilizations was over, and this time, a wise ruler had brought a new government system. Unlike other conquerors in history, Cyrus the Great did not kill the defeated kings of Medes, Lydia, and Babylon. Instead, he exiled them and even provided them with a prosperous life. His empire was a quasi-utopia, and most of the ancient peoples of that time were its citizens and settled in Persia. In 530 BC, the world witnessed the loss of its first great emperor, who left behind a new form of government called empire as his legacy and precious gift.
کوروش پارسی تونست
Cyrus II formed an empire for the first time, and more importantly, he built a quasi-utopia. Why could no other king or conqueror do the same after him? The secret was revealed by restart leader Syed Mohammad Hosseini for the first time after several thousand years.
آریستوکراسی امپراتوری کوروش یعنی چی؟ باید سه تا شرط داشته باشه. یکی اینکه باید یک کوروش داشته باشه. دو، باید یک عارفی، صوفی، دانشمند بزرگی باشه پشت این آدم. و سه، باید قانون اساسی محکم و قوی و قدرتمندی داشته باشه.
شخص کوروشیان
Cyrus II, or the emperor, was the first side of this triangle, but not the most important one. The triangle's second and most crucial side was the person behind Cyrus. But who was that person? The answer can be found in the ancient city of Susa.
Daniel was one of the Jewish nobles of Jerusalem and was respected by the Jews since he was young. After the first Babylonian attack on the country of Jews by Nebuchadnezzar II, Daniel repeatedly warned the people of Jerusalem about the danger of the main attack by the next king of Babylon, Bukhtar-Nasr. Still, the Jews ignored Daniel's warnings because the people and their king considered themselves very strong. Finally, Daniel's prediction came true, and in 597 BC, the new king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar III, called Bukhton-Nasr, marched to Jerusalem. In the book of Daniel, it is stated that Nebuchadnezzar attacked and besieged Jerusalem for the second time during the reign of the last king of the Jews. The reason for this attack was religious conflicts.
بختالنصر آشوری حمله کرد، خوارمادر موبدان زرتشتی رو سرویس کرد و یهودیان.
After the collapse of the United Kingdom of Israel and the destruction of its northern part by the Assyrian civilization, the southern part, the Kingdom of Judah, lasted longer and was the sanctuary of the remaining 3 nations of the 12 nations of Israelites. This is how many Assyrians settled in the northern lands of Judah. After the Chaldeans founded the new Babylonian kingdom, they attacked the Assyrian realm with the cooperation of the Median kingdom and finally destroyed the Assyrian civilization in 612 BC. That is how the Assyrians, who were living in the northern lands of Judah, were left without a supporter and oppressed by the Jews. After years of persecution of the Assyrians by the Jews, an Assyrian had now become the most powerful man in the ancient world. So he went to Jerusalem to take revenge on the Jews. After capturing the kingdom of Judah and taking their king into captivity, he robbed all their holy monuments. Nebuchadnezzar decided to massacre all the Jews, but he changed his mind for one reason.
The reason for this decision was Daniel himself.
دانیال نبی یه بچه 17-18 ساله به همراه ارمیای نبی رفتن و توی جنگل از یه بچه امضا گرفتن. قرار شاه بشی، شما اینجا امضا کن، اگه شاه شدی من هر جا بودم ما رو نکشی. این بچه 12 ساله بعد از چند سال میشه مشاور نبوکدنصر. اون مشاور عرضم حضور شما که بعدش میشه رئیس زندان، بعدش اونجا به خاطر محبت میگه چرا اینقدر زندانی‌ها باید باج بدن، بخواد بهشون کمک میکنه، محبوب میشه تو زندانی، خلاص کودتا میکنه، پادشاهی رو میگیره و میشه پادشاه. بعد لشکر درست میکنه، حمله میکنه، شروع میکنه کشتار. 750,000 یهودی رو به اسارت میبره. بعد از اینکه بختالنصر حمله کرد، شروع کرد کشتار کردن، رسید به قوم اینا، دانیال نبی رفت جلو، اماننامه رو نشون داد، گفت به خاطر شما میبخشم.
After killing many Jews and destroying Solomon's temple, Bukhton-Nasr took most Jews as captives to Babylon and left a few under Daniel's orders in Jerusalem. He threatened them that if they did not follow Daniel's orders, he would kill them all. The captive Jews who ignored Daniel's warnings were sent to Babylon as slaves and had a tough time in the following years.
But a simple event changed the course of Jews' history.
بختالنصر یه خواب میبینه، وحشت میکنه، خواب میپره، تمام معبرین رو صدا میکنه، تمام وزرا میگه بله، میگن بفرمایید، میگه خواب منو تعبیر کنید، میگن خب بفرمایید، میگه خوابم یادم رفته، میگن چه خوابتون یادتون رفته، باید بگید با تعبیر کنید. گفت نه، گردن همتون میزنم، اول خواب منو به من بگید، دوم تعبیر کنید. گفتم ما نمیدونیم از شما خوابتون، ما خوابتون رو بگیم. که دانیال نبی اومد، هم خوابشی گفت هم تعبیر کرد.
After this story, Daniel's closeness and credibility to Nebuchadnezzar increased.
Bukhton-Nasr, disturbed by his dream, asked Daniel to come to Babylon. After Daniel interpreted the dream, Bakhto-Nasr asked him to stay with him as a consultant. Daniel remained in Babylon until the conquest of Babylon by Cyrus, but he did not serve the successors of Bakhto-Nasr. After the conquest of Babylon by Persians, Daniel was chosen by Cyrus as one of the empire's chief counselors.
کوروش کبیر تصمیم داشت
Cyrus the Great wanted to ask Daniel to rule the whole empire, but some in the royal court decided to get Daniel out of the way. Ironically, many of these were Jews.
دانیال نبی چرا یهودی‌ها ازش نفرت دارن؟ برای اینکه در تاریخ یهود دانیال نبی تنها فردی بود که هم مشاور بخت و نسلی بود که یهودی‌ها رو کشت و هم مشاور کوروش بود. یعنی هم کوروش فرستاد هم بخت و نصر رو. پس برای همین یهودی‌ها میگن کوروش میخوان دانیال نبی رو قایم کنن. دقیقاً همین.
شخص دانیال ضلع دومه.
Daniel was the second side of this triangle. The third side of this triangle was the constitution of Cyrus. Are there any traces of Cyrus's constitution left?
یعنی عقل و دل توأماً در آریستوکراسی، حکومت نوع آریستوکراسی باید دخالت کنه. یعنی صوفی منشی، یعنی فیلسوف منشی، یعنی حکومت فیلسوفان و دانایان. هیچ کسی چی نمیدونه.
سرزمین پرشیا میزبان اولین
Persia hosted the first quasi-utopia in the world. A gem in the ancient world whose constitution was presented by the great Sufi Daniel. The emperor, Cyrus, was the executor. Did this happen in another country? To find the answer to this question, we must travel to Greece, a land that turned into the host of great philosophers from the chaos and civil wars. The main question is, how did this happen? And do we have a philosophy called Greek philosophy?
یک گروهی از یونانی ها که ریاضیدان بودن و اینا دنبال سوفیسم بودن، انسان کامل بودن. یعنی فلسفه یونان به فلسفه میگن که یه سری یونانی رفتن از ایران فلسفه رو یاد گرفتن، اومدن بیرون توضیح دادن. فلسفه تولید نشده. اینها رفتن ایران، فهمیدن که سوفیسم مال ایرانه، اومدن تو شیراز اون طرفا به سوفیسم ایرانی ایمان آوردن، متوجه شدن و اینها برگشتن به یونان. بعد از مدتی یه مدرسه درست کردن نتیجتاً که توش فیثاغورس‌ها اومدن بیرون.
Pythagoras was born on Samos Island in 569 BC. In his youth, he went on many trips, which made it possible for him to get familiar with the way of thinking of ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, and Persian Sufis. He was out of Greece for almost 22 years. He lived in Egypt for many years, served the ancient Egyptian priests, and learned various sciences. Then he went to Babylon to start as a disciple again. But he was taken captive in Babylon and lived in captivity for a long time, until Darius the Great released him and took him to Persia. Pythagoras visited Persepolis during its construction. He was eventually hired as an architecture supervisor to implement this massive project. At the same time, he became acquainted with the ideas of Persian mysticism. He undertook a great mission to transfer Persian mysticism and philosophy beyond the borders of the Persian Empire. After a while, he left Persia for Egypt. Around 530 BC, he returned from Egypt to his hometown and started Semicircle School, now known as the School of Pythagoras. The way of thinking of this school conflicted with the democratic ruling system of the government. Since the people of Samos did not like the philosophical views of the school, Pythagoras had to leave his hometown and go to Greece and become a resident in Craton.
البته دموکراسی
Democracy in ancient Greece had some differences from modern democracy. The word democracy comes from the Greek word demoskratia, which means the majority vote. But which majority?
In the eyes of the Greek rulers of that time, enslaved people, women, and poor people were considered the lower classes of society, not Greek citizens. So they did not have the right to vote. In contrast, only a handful of people, including the wealthy, had the right to vote. Pythagoras and his followers disagreed with such a view of democracy.
فیثاغورس شاگردانش بارها
Pythagoras and his disciples were repeatedly persecuted by fanatics. Finally, in 495 BC, the religious leaders and the rulers of the democratic government incited the people to attack the school of Pythagoras, and unfortunately, Pythagoras and his students were burned alive or killed by the Democrats. Although it is true that Pythagoras was killed and his school was ruined, the thoughts and ideas of the Pythagorean school survived until a person emerged from his school who is very important in world history, Socrates.
این مکتب در یونان شکل میگیره، شروع میکنه دانشمندان بزرگ بیرون دادن. در طول زمان بعد از مدتی مردی از این مکتب دوباره بلند میشه، اسم اون هست سقراط. آقای سقراط یک برنامه میده بیرون به نام ریستارت. اسم اون برنامه رو میذاره سوال. اسم اون برنامه رو میذاره دیالوگ، رد و بدل دیالوگ. با سوال شروع میکنه تمام ادیان رو میده رو هوا، افکار رو میده رو هوا. با سوال مردم رو میریزه به هم.
Socrates was born in 470 BC in Athens. He is the father of ethics and moral philosophy, and the founder of Western philosophy. In his youth, he served in the army as an infantryman. His friends and fellow citizens used to praise his courage and perseverance in Peloponnesian Wars. The courage he showed in those wars made him a prominent figure. In the city center of Athens' Agora, Socrates used to gather young people and thinkers around himself and encourage them to question and evaluate their gods, values, and themselves. Although Socrates' followers respected him, due to his bravery on the battlefield and his disregard for worldly matters, they also praised him for his humility in reason and wisdom. The origin of his philosophy was to admit his ignorance, as he said, "I know that I do not know."
Socrates' thoughts were not popular with the people of his time like his teacher's thoughts, Pythagoras.
جناب آقای سقراط گرفتن به حکم اعدامش صادر کردن. چجوری صادر کردن؟ رأیگیری که از مجلس نمایندگان اون موقع، هیئت منصفه به قول خودمون اون موقع، قضات عالی، دیوان فلان، مصلحت نظام، همه نشستن با رأی مردم هم حضور داشتن، اعلام کردن که سقراط حکمش اعدام. چون سقراط باباش مجسمه ساز و اینا بود و بعد مجسمه خیلی خوب میساخت، روابط بسیار قوی هم توسط یکی از عموهاش تو نظام و تو مصلحت نظام نیرو داشت. اینا اون بالا صحبت کردن، قبول کردن که بیخیالشن، نکشنش دیگه. سقراط فردا صبحش میرفت توی یه جایی که 5 نفر آدم نشسته بودن، 10 تا جوان بودن، 20 تا آدم بودن، 20 تا جمعیت بودید، میاد اونجا میگفت دموکراسی میشه، باور نداریم دموکراسی. چه من نمیکشی؟ گفتم حکومت واسه نمیخوام بکشه، بخشیده. رأی مردم میزان رأی ملته. شما مردم رأی دادین منو باید بکشن. حکومت خر کیه؟ مگه شما رأیتون این نبوده که منو بکشن؟ پس دو حالت داره، یا دموکراسی اینه یا منو بکشی. انقدر اینو گفت حکومت گرفتش.
متاسفانه تاریخ همیشه
Unfortunately, it's always been proven that anyone who understands a lot and tries to enlighten others would be eliminated by the political and religious rulers, and ordinary people always do nothing about it.
In 399 BC, Socrates was sentenced to death. His alleged crimes were corrupting the youth and disbelieving in the gods. Since he knew that the court was corrupt and his verdict had already been decided, in his defense, Socrates gave his famous speech to enlighten people and for the record of history. After that, the judges ruled that he should drink the cup of poison, and Socrates accepted the sentence. Finally, while his disciples offered him escape, he preferred death over escape. And so, democracy in Greece deprived humanity of the presence of such a great Sufi.
Although the character of Socrates was very influential in shaping Western philosophy, no books of Socrates himself have left.
Socrates raised many disciples during his prolific life. All these years, he tried to be the guardian of the mystical school and philosophy. He always was committed to the philosophy of Persian mysticism, introduced into Greek culture by his teacher, Pythagoras. The works left by Socrates' disciples confirm this critical secret. One of his most important students was Xenophon, whose most famous book is Cyropaedia, or Cyrus's Letter. The existence of the Cyropaedia by Xenophon, a student of Socrates, is proof that the ways of the Persians influenced the thoughts of Socrates and Pythagoras. According to Thomas Jefferson himself, this book, written thousands of years ago, became the basis for the formation of a fledgling but mighty country called the United States of America.
But the most important disciple of Socrates was a man named Plato.
همینجور که نگرشی که سقراط از گذشته توضیح داد راجع به ریاست، همینجوری هم آریستوکراسی رو افلاطون از نگاه سقراط توضیح داد که جهان هیچی از آریستوکراسی نمیدونه و سقراط هر چی تلاش کرد که اینو به مردم بفهمونه مردم نفهمیدن و وقتی سقراط رو کشتن دفن شد این تفکرات سقراط که خود سقراط هم از صوفیان ایرانی گرفته بوده. افلاطون شروع میکنه، چون سقراط کتاب نداشته دیگه، مطالبش میگفته و اینا، یک صوفی بسیار بزرگیه. افلاطون شروع میکنه افکار سقراط رو نوشتن.
Plato was born in Athens in 427 BC. He was raised in a powerful political family. His real name was Aristocracy. Plato was his title, which means deep, wide, and vast. This title indicates the depth of his vision and the extent of his knowledge and wisdom in theosophy, philosophy, and various branches of sciences. Plato came from a large and noble family. His lineage goes from his father to the last king of Athens, and his mother to Solon, one of the 7 sages among the ancient Greeks. Plato was very gifted as a child. His father hired teachers to teach him in the fields of music, philosophy, and literature. Also, he was significantly influenced by the character of Pythagoras. He became a student of Socrates at the age of 20 and lasted this fellowship for 8 years. In 399 BC, Plato witnessed the unfair execution of his teacher, Socrates. Plato believed that the execution of Socrates was the outcome of democracy. After the execution of Socrates, Plato left Athens for Megara.
Plato believes ignorant people will get to critical positions, and make biased decisions in a democracy. He said that when people become ill, they do not gather others to diagnose their illness. They go to a doctor instead. Why shouldn't we consider a similar logic for governance? Such governance will be the rule of the wise, named Aristocracy.
After Socrates' death, Plato traveled to the cities of Greece and foreign countries, such as Megara, for several years. After a trip to Sicily in 387 BC, he returned to Athens at 40 and founded a philosophical school named Academy. In his famous school, he introduced the components of his ideal government, namely aristocracy, and presented part of the constitutions of the government of the wise. Unfortunately, due to heavy boycott, subversion, censorship, and repression by the religious and political leaders, these valuable teachings and principles disappeared from public access. Fortunately, Plato's thoughts have been saved by the sacrifices of Sufis and wise mystiques. Finally, in 347 BC, this great philosopher passed away.
مرگ سقراط و ظهور افلاطون.
Socrates' death and the rise of Plato were signs of an important event, the migration of mysticism and philosophy from east to west, which coincided with the collapse of the Achaemenid Empire. So, Persia lost the main components of the Utopia, in other words, aristocracy. For the second time in history, we have seen the emergence of an unknown person from an unknown country who reforms an empire, and this time rules almost the entire ancient world. His name was Alexander of Macedonia.
Alexander III of Macedonia, named Alexander the Great, was born in 356 BC in Pella. Before reaching the age of 30, he built one of the largest empires of the ancient world, stretching from the Greek Sea to the Himalayas. He was invincible in battle. He is known as the Great Conqueror throughout history. He was the main reason for the global spread of Greek culture and civilization. He was also the main cause of the Hellenism era and the appearance of the Silk Road. In 336 BC, when Alexander was only 20 years old, his father Philip was assassinated suspiciously, which changed Alexander's fate forever. A child who was never supposed to be a king ascended to the throne.
تو همه کتاب‌ها
We always were told that Aristotle was the one who taught Alexander. But this is not true. Aristotle played another role in Alexander's life. This was another mystery of several thousand years, which was first revealed by Restart Leader.
اسکندر مقدونی رو فرستاد، کسی که باباش توسط به دستور جناب آقای ارسطو کشته شده بود. حالا تمام تاریخ ایشون چسبونده به ارسطو.
ارسطو و طرفداراش.
Aristotle and his followers rumored that Philip had been assassinated by the Persians. That's why the flame of war began between Alexander and the Achaemenid Empire.
In the beginning, Alexander defeated all the city-states of mainland Greece and united them under one federation called the Hellenic League. In 334 BC, he invaded Asia Minor, an Achaemenid-controlled region. That was a series of battles that lasted 10 years. During these decisive battles, especially Isu and Gaugamela, the hegemony of the Persians and their king Darius III shattered. Alexander then proceeded to Jerusalem, which warmly welcomed him. After that, he sent an army to Egypt and conquered it. The Egyptians called him the Savior and son of Ammon. After the conquest of Egypt, he moved to the heart of the Persian kingdom and conquered Babylon. For the second time in history, Babylon was conquered without bloodshed. At that time, Alexander's empire stretched from the Adriatic Sea to the Indus River. From Anatolia to Egypt, Alexander was called the Liberator, and it was here that he was given the predicted title of Dual Karnain, or Zul Karnain.
تو همه کتاب‌ها
We always have been told that Alexander was just a conqueror, while the truth is something else.
اون زمانی که اسکندر به ایران حمله کرد، این موبدان زرتشتی لطف میکردن معابدی که داشتن، هر کسی که پول داشت و پله داشت، حتی میراث خوارم نداشت، پولاشو برمیشه میذاشتن به مرغ، میدادن اون تو. اسکندر مقدونی وقتی اومد این معابد اینها رو خراب کرد، آتش کرد، هاشون خراب کرد، گنجا، طلاها مثل آب روان بود. ببین چقدر تلمبار کرده بودن. یه قانونی در موبدان زرتشتی گذاشته بودن که هر کس میخواد عروسی کنه بعد شب اول عروسه رو بده دست این موبده. اسکندر اومد کشور گرفت، توضیح داد به مردم که شما میدونید من کیم؟ گفتن نگو من نوادگان کوروشم. اسکندر روزی که صوفی بهش گفتش که باید حمله کنی ایران، انسان کامل هم تازه نمیشناخت، این کوروش بود اسکندر. ذوالقرنین لقب اسکندره، اسکندر مقدونی به فرمانش اومد.
The conquest of the Persian Empire by Alexander reveals another secret.
Although the Persian army was defeated at the Battle of Isu and Gaugamela, and Darius III, or Dara, fled, Alexander the Great never sought revenge on the Persian king and his wife. He treated Darius's wife, mother, and daughter with respect. The fate of the last Achaemenid king was to be murdered by his nephew. When Alexander reached Dara's bedside, he transferred his body to Persia with respect.
در آثار عرفای
Persian Sufis, such as Nizami Ganjavi, have described Alexander's last encounter with Dara. Alexander tells Dara that he has come to restore the Cyrus Empire, and Alexander is the true heir of Cyrus.
Babylonian astronomical diaries called Alexander the king of the world before Babylon's conquest by him. They happily went to greet him. Also, when Alexander entered Jerusalem, he offered a sacrifice in the Holy Temple and invited the Jews to live in Alexandria. The Jews also showed him the 8th chapter of the prophecy in the book of Daniel, which describes the conquest of the Persian Empire by a mighty Greek king. This was how the second quasi-utopia of the world formed.
Alexander the Great was poisoned and murdered at the age of 33. The secret of Alexander's death was also revealed by Restart leader.
ارسطو که خودش یکی از معلم‌های اسکندر مقدونی بود، خودش در قتل پدر اسکندر و خود اسکندر نقش داشت.
با اینکه اسکندر در جوانی
Although Alexander died at a young age, he had done many great things. One of them was to build cities called Alexandria in all the conquered countries, and one of them still exists in Egypt with the same name.
One of the crucial actions of Alexander the Great was establishing modern cities called Alexandria. He invited all wise people and scientists to settle in these cities, and hence the first universities in the world were established. The teachers and graduates of these universities created and expanded various branches of science, from medicine to geometry. These schools introduced geniuses to the world, whose effects are still evident today. Galen, the famous physician and sage, was one of them.
شاید بشه گفت که مشهورترین خروجی
It can be said that one of the most famous outputs of the University of Alexandria was the great philosopher Hypatia, who was the last librarian of the Library of Alexandria.
Hypatia, the famous astronomer and mathematician, is the world's first female mathematician. She was a professor of philosophy and mathematics in Alexandria and had astronomy expertise. Among the services of this great lady, we can point to the discovery of the elliptical orbit of celestial bodies, which proved that the Earth is not the center of the universe. Instead, the Earth and other planets in the solar system are orbiting around the Sun. Thus, her calculations ended the 500-year rule of Ptolemaic thought. In 415 AD, Hypatia was stoned to death by fanatical Christians in her hometown. This is how the golden era of Alexandria came to an end.
سرنوشت هیپاتیس
The fate of Hypatia was similar to her teachers, Socrates and Pythagoras. History has proven to us that the great people of the world usually have similar destinies.
Unfortunately, throughout history, religious leaders and rulers have eliminated many great people of the world, and their works have been deliberately destroyed. But a few of those were not removable. So religious leaders and rulers reduced these great people to the level of a scientist by removing and distorting their works. That is why everyone knows these great people only as mathematicians, astronomers, chemists, or sometimes only as poets. So ordinary people have no clue about their philosophy and thoughts. Restart Leader has revealed many scientific secrets by presenting, placing, and explaining the deleted or distorted parts of the contents created by the world's great mystics, such as Rumi, verses and sayings that were sometimes hidden for thousands of years. From Archimedes to Hypatia, all were great women and men who were introduced to the world. All these great people were indebted to the ideas of Plato's philosophy. Throughout history, Plato's thoughts have been censored and boycotted by Aristotle's supporters, and the Church remained silent for centuries so that no one would discover the true secret of the aristocracy. Political and religious rulers have worked together to deceive the people that their governments are legitimate and falsely announce themselves as the actual promised Utopia. Plato, on top of introducing the name of Utopia, presented a small example of it, called Atlantis. Unfortunately, this censorship and boycott continue to this day. That's why today's human beings consider democracy as the apex and ultimate development of human thoughts.
افلاطون
Plato tells the lost secret of the aristocracy in his most famous book, the Book of the Republic.
5 تا شکل حکومت میگه اینجا راز بزرگی که نمیخوان تو بفهمی. اولین حکومت، بهترین حکومت، قشنگترین حکومت، حکومت دانایانه. اسمش از حکومت دانایان، فیلسوف شاهی. یعنی یک آدمی وجود داره که صوفی منشه، قوانین نوشته میشه، کنکوریه،
اگر به این نرسیدی و نشد، بهترین حکومت بعدش نسبتاً تیموکراسیه. میگه این تیموکراسی حکومتیه که ممکنه که زمامداران، خود زمامدار اصلا آدم خوبی باشه ولی بچهش میتونه بچه نوح باشه. بچه های بی‌نژاد و ابله میان رو حکومت و مردم رو نمیتونن جذب کنن. وقتی تیموکراسی تولید میشه یواش یواش به اولیگارشی تبدیل میشه. در این زمان حکومت اولیگارشی خیلی خوبه برای جنگ، اما تو صلح نابود میکنه ملت رو. میگه بعد از این گندترین اتفاق در تاریخ میفته، اسمش هست دموکراسی. همین دموکراسی که الان دنیا داره از رو ارسطو مینویسه، رده 4 شکل حکومتگریه. میگه حکومت دموکراسی اختلاف طبقاتی میاره و در نتیجه افزایش رباخواری. آدم‌های نادان دموکراسی رو تولید کنن در کشور تا 40 سال بعد برسه به استبداد، آخرین نوع حکومته. میگه دیگه این مردم فاتحه‌شون خونده است. نتیجه گیری دموکراسی میشود استبداد.
با اون که بیش از 2000
Although more than 2,000 years have passed since Plato, few have talked about Plato and his views.
چرا ما راجع به آریستوکراسی حرف میزنیم؟ زیرا که جهان راجعش صحبت نکرد. یعنی صوفی منشی، یعنی فیلسوفی منشی، یعنی حکومت فیلسوفان و دانایان. هیچ کسی چی نمیدونه. اسم این نوع حکومت بهش میگن آریستوکراسی که در ویکی‌پدیاها و اینا میخوان اینو بزنن اشرافیگری، چون باید انسان کامل نظر کنه در این نوع حکومت که جهان روش مونده، نمیدونن چیه.
پس اگه به دنبال آرمان شهر هستیم.
So if we're really looking for aristocracy, we only have one reference, Plato. Is there anyone among contemporary thinkers who's ever talked about Plato and his views?
Restart Leader, in various programs, including The Rise of Cyrus's Empire, explains the components of a utopia, which are equivalent to Plato's constitution that has been kept secret for thousands of years. The references in these programs are all from Plato.
پس این آریستوکراسی، حکومت دانایان، پادشاه تمام دانایی، حکومتی است که سقراط گفته. بعد از سقراط که افلاطون نوشته افکارشو، یه نفر در کره زمین هست که برای شما اینو توضیح داده، اون منم. اگر کسی تفسیر کرده افکار سقراط رو، کتابش ملتی رو معرفی کنه. رأی فهمیدنیه. باید مردم شعورشون به جایی برسه که بفهمن کی انتخاب کنن یا چه رأیی بدن. رأی دادنی نیست که، رأی فهمیدنی. باید بفهمی این دعوای سقراط، بعد از سقراط اول نفر در کره زمین منم. با ما دو تا دعوا شبیه هم دیگه است، همه با ما مشکل دارن. مشکل کجاست؟ مشکل اینه که ما میگیم تمام هر حزبی که در کره زمین وجود داره زیر مجموعه آریستوکراسی. چرا؟ چون ما میگیم عقل و دل هر دو توأماً باید در آریستوکراسی، حکومت مورد نظر افلاطون و سقراط، حکومت مدینه فاضله معنی داره.
ایشون برنامه‌های زیاد.
He has performed many programs during these years full of scientific, historical, and philosophical materials. If we consider each minute of a program as the equivalent of one page, the book that Restart Leader has presented to the world has more than 700,000 pages. He's only just mentioned 3 articles of Cyrus's Empire Constitution that have shaken the world of politics: the right to bear arms, paying salaries to the housewives, and banning children under the age of 18 from interfering with religion and politics.
گفتیم برای این که نجات پیدا کنیم من و تو، اینه که 22 قانون اساسی که در آینده نوشته میشه توسط امپراتوری تصوف، اینها رو پشتش وایسیم و توضیح دادیم که این قوانین چیه. ما مقننه رو میخوایم بنویسیم هموطن، یعنی قوانینی که یک اسلحه باید آزاد باشه. شرط آزادی اسلحه قانون اول اپوزیسیون ریستارت و فرق ما با آمریکا در اینه که هر کسی بعد از اینکه امپراتوری کوروش اومد آزادی اسلحه رو اعلام کردیم، شوی رو پخش کنه، آزادی بیانی داشته باشه، بیا بگه چیکار کنیم آزادی اسلحه رو کمترش کنیم، میگیره. ما فرق با آمریکاییم، این میگه حرف بزنیم، ما اصلا اجازه حرف نداریم.
قانون اول اینی که خانم‌های خانه‌دار باید 1/3 عرف جامعه حقوق بگیرن. همه زن‌های ایرانی چه خانه‌دار خانم‌ها و چه سر کار میرن باید حقوق از دولت دریافت کنن به خاطر داشتن بچه یا همین که چای دم میکنن. قانون اساسی دیگری در تصوف است که این قانونه. بچه زیر 18 سال ورودش به هر گونه حزب سیاسی و مذهبی ممنوعه.
آیا تو دنیای معاصر
Is there any country that has the elements of aristocracy nowadays? Or at least something close to it?
در یک کشوری مثل آمریکا دموکرات جزئی از قوه مجریه آمریکاست. یعنی آمریکا دموکرات نیست. آمریکا اصلا جمهوری خواهی نیست. آمریکا ابداً عرضم حضور شما که سکولار هم نیست. آمریکا سوسیالیست هم نیست. همه اینها عضو کوچکی یا متوسطی از آمریکا.
ما گفتیم از قوانین امپراتوری کوروش که در دست ماست 30 تا 35%، 36-7% رو آمریکایی‌ها انجام دادن. در کره زمین تنها کشوری که قوانین اهل تصوف و عرفا رو، قوانین افلاطون با نگرش سقراطی رو در کشورش تونسته پیاده کنه 35-6% گرد کنیم، از عدد پی هم صرف نظر کنیم 40% آمریکا نزدیک به قوانین امپراتوری کوروشی است که ما قراره در جامعه ایران پیاده کنیم.
نکته جالب اینه که
It is interesting. Unlike so-called experts, he believes that the American government is neither a democracy nor a republic. So, what system is the American government?
The word republic derives from the Latin word res publicus, which means the rule of law. In this type of government, the law is the highest authority for governance, and the Parliament of Legislators is the branch that represents it. So, no other branch can revoke the established laws. In other words, republic means the dictatorship of the law. On the other hand, the word democracy derives from the Greek word demos kratia, which means majority vote. In this type of government, the vote of the majority is the highest authority for governance. In other words, democracy means the dictatorship of the majority. In the U.S. government, both Congress and the presidency can enact special laws. They also can revoke and veto the other branches' passed laws. That is why the U.S. government cannot be considered a pure republic. On the other hand, due to the existence of the electoral votes system, the basis of the U.S. government is not based on the majority vote, so this government is not considered a democracy as well. The USA's founding fathers paid attention to these crucial points when they established this country. These items were adapted from Cyropedia, written by Xenophon, the famous student of Socrates.
البته ایشون
Actually, he has revealed many historical secrets as well.
ما یه دونه قوم لوط داریم، یه کویر لوط در کره زمین. یه شهر بیاد اسمش لوط باشه، یه دهات بیاد اسمش لوط باشه. معلومه که این قوم لوط تو کویر لوط بودن. حالا اون دفعه من گفتم داوود پیامبر یک کرد، بعد گفتن آقا کجا میگه کرده؟ بابا برو اسرائیل نگاه کن، یه سری یهودی‌ها اونجا اصلا خودشون کرد میدونن هموطن. یکی از ادیانی که 85% کل کره زمین به اون دین بودن، دین مانی پیامبر ایرانی. شما نه از مانی چیزی میدونی نه اصلا میدونی الان دین مانی چیه. چطور امکان داره دینی که 85% مردم کره زمین بهش ایمان میارن
از بین میره، اسم مانی از بین میره. چطور امکان داره الان من کاری کنم که کل مسیحیت از بین بره؟ یک، باید همه اون مسیحا رو بکشم. دو، باید زیر شکنجه و اینا کاری کنم که 100 سال تاریخ حذف بشه، بچه هایی که 100 سال دیگه به دنیا میان نفهمن این موضوع. کاری که زرتشتی‌ها دوبار کردن در سوزوندن کتابا، که بعد حالا میگن هم کتاب سوزی، بعضی کتابا رو خود زرتشتی‌ها سوزوندن وقتی اعراب حمله کردن مثلا گردن اعراب. در برنامه ریاست توضیح دادیم که ابراهیم همون زرتشته و زرتشتیان صدها هزار دختر و پسر رو در دوران اشکانیان دفن کردن، زنده به گور کردن، کشتن، آتیش زدن تا تاریخ اشکانیان نیاد بیرون. چرا؟ که بگن ادیان ابراهیمی فرق میکنه با ادیان غیر ابراهیمی و نمیخواستن بگن که زرتشت همون ابراهیمه.
Revealing the secret that Abraham and Zoroaster are one person instead of two by Restart Leader opened many historical knots. One of the most important impacts of revealing this secret was that the marriages of Zoroaster with Sarah and Hajar resulted in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Therefore, all these religions have Persian roots. As this mystery spreads more every day, politicians can no longer exploit their followers by fanning the flames of religious wars that have lasted several thousand years. Also, religious wars and racial divisions will disappear because the people will know that Zoroaster built Kaaba, who was a Persian prophet.
In one of his programs, Restart Leader spoke about the different Jewish ethnic groups, which resulted in revealing a significant secret: Hitler's religion.
یک گروه دیگری در جهان از یهودی‌ها وجود داره که هیچ کی راجبشون حرف نمیزنه. نژادی در یهود وجود داره به نام اشکنازی، یعنی هیتلر یهودی بوده، از نژاد اشکنازی بود. این داستان اوکراین که نئونازی توضیح میده ربط داره. اوکی، پس مرکل اشکنازیه.
In these programs, he talks about concepts such as justice, the right to bear arms, education, politics, women's rights, and intelligent voting, which are the foundations of a utopia. These concepts are so complex and confusing that few dare to approach them or be able to present them to the public in simple words. Restart Leader explains them clearly and gradually to the public. He also revealed many sealed secrets of history and religions that no one in public was aware of for thousands of years. The reason for censoring these secrets was the deliberate cooperation of the religious leaders and rulers who did not want these secrets revealed, because when they are revealed, they will lose their power to dominate the people.
In these programs, many secrets were revealed. For example, the Pharaoh of Moses' time was a Zoroastrian, Persian roots of Jesus, Peter's succession after Jesus, and dozens of other cases.
The exposure of these secrets ended the domination and secrecy of religions for thousands of years. These disclosures were not only in the field of history and religions, but also it was about the secrets of the world of politics in a series of programs called This Year's Verdict is a Different One.
سیاسیون میگن آقای حسینی ماست چیه؟ میگم سفیده. میگه اوکی، تا وقتی سفیدی که پولش ندادیم 1 میلیون دلار رفتیم تو حسابت، ماست دیگه چیه آقا حسینی؟ سیاهه. پس سیاستمدارا به کسی میگن که ماست سفیده تا پولش نگرفته، پولش گرفت دیگه ماست سیاهه. پستشو گرفت دیگه ما سیاه، هر چی که دموکراسی، هر چی که احزاب میگن. یعنی زمانی که داره یک کشوری رژیمش عوض میشه، انگلیسی‌ها نگاه میکنن اینا 50 سال توی 30 سال 35 سال تو عراق داشتن میخوردن، بعد دیدن حالا داره عوض میشه کاری نمیتونن بکنن، زنگ زدن روسیه. خیلی ساده. گفتن آقا مردمش میخوره شعور پیدا کردن، دارن قیام میکنن، اینا حاضری جنس منو بخری به نام عراق، جنس جدیدی بفروشی به من جای دیگه؟ اونم اون کشور دیگه مال تو، این کشور مال ما. صدام حسین از طریق حزب بعث وابسته به روس‌ها به قدرت است. پس مردم کره زمین رو سیاستمدارها و ادیان به دو قسمت تقسیم کنن، یا برده جنسی یا برده جسمی. تو یک زن و دختر یا پسری هستی که ازدواج میکنی، تو مثل سگ کار میکنی، زنت این سگ کار میکنه، بعد تولید مثل میکنی. برای کارخونه من بچه‌ای تولید میکنه که وقتی تو مردی مثل سگ تو کارخونه من کار کنه. اینش هم برده جسمی. یعنی یک زن، یه شوهر که کار میکنه باید بتونه خرج زن بچه‌شو بده. دنیا رو کاری کردن که زنم باید کار کنه. با یا هم برده جنسی، مثل اینستاگرام برای چی زدن؟ قدیم یارو باید برای پیرزنای پولدار دنیا فیلم درست میکرد، میرفت از دختره عکس میگرفت، خانم اینطوری کن عکس میگرفت، اینجوری کن عکس میگرفت، بعد این آلبومو درست میکرد مثل خر، یه نفر بعد میفرستاد هزینه میکرد، بعد میبرد میداد به اون پولداره، میگفت ببخشید این شبی مثلا $20,000، این شبی $7,000. الان این کارو نکردن، یه اینستاگرام درست کردن، چالش توش میزنن، سینه‌ها تکون بده، برو ببین سالی چند تا دختر در سرتاسر جهان داره گم میشه. میفرستم واسه اون پول داره دیگه، آلبوم نمیخواد دیگه، هزینه نمیخواد که یارو اینجا نشسته فقط اینستاگرامو باز کردن، تو چالش تولید میکنن، دخترها میرقصن، میگه این دختر آلمانیه، دختر آدرسشون هم دارن. پس تو یا برده جسمی یا برده جنسی، جز این هستی بی‌ناموسی. این سیاستمدار یه دینداره. پولدارا با احمقا حال میکنن، باهوشا زیر مجموعه احمقا کار میکنن. دانشمندا تو کجا میرن درس بخونن؟ دانشگاه. استادای این دانشجویان کیان؟ همونایی که در کلاس‌های قبلی درس خوندن. یعنی یک دروغی که عدد پی انتها نداره، نسل به نسل دارن تدریس میکنن و ازت امتحان میگیرن و اگر امتحانو پاس نکنی، یعنی بگی دایره عدد پی انتها نداره، رد میکنن، یعنی باید بری تو خونه بشینی. پس استاد همون مقلد میمون خریست که داره از استاد قبلیش، همون میمون خر مقلد از استاد قبلیش همینطور داره به تو فیزیک یاد میده، شیمی یاد میده، علوم سیاسی یاد میده. دموکراسی دیکتاتور شد. of course. وقتی 50 تا خر با هم بشینن مشورت کنن، نتیجهش خر جدیده. چرا دنبال شیر توش میگردیم؟ دنبال دانشمند فیلسوف توش میگردیم. دموکراسی یعنی برآیند نیروهای فکری موجود در یک جامعه که اثر انگشت اون جامعه است. و اگر سیاستمداری گفت که دموکراسی فرانسه رو میخوایم در ایران پیاده کنیم، بهش بگید که خر خودتی و ما گول نمیخوریم، چون دموکراسی کشور دیگر رو نمیشه در یک کشور دیگه پیاده کرد. اعتقاد داریم باید جایگاه دیکتاتوری از بین بره و نه دیکتاتور. و راز رو در یک کلمه توضیح بدم. هر زمانی در هر کشوری هر گروه سیاسی گفت مرگ بر فلانی، یعنی اینکه میخواهد جایگاه دیکتاتوری را حفظ کند و فقط میخواهد دیکتاتور را تعویض کند. پایا پای بهش میگفتن. بعد سکه زده شد. برو بخون تاریخ سکه زدن کی بوده. بعد اسکناس تولید شد. یک انقلابی در داد و ستد شد. سکه نو زنن بر رخ زر، درهمش کم عیار میبینم. شاه نعمت الله ولی میشه ارز دیجیتالی. یعنی دنیا به جای میرسه که سکه جدید، یعنی یک ساختار جدیدی از یه سکه تولید میشه. ابتدا به ساکن اومدن پولاشونو گذاشتن روی مدیا رو گرفتن، گلوبالیسم شکل گرفت. بعد اومدن چیکار کردن؟ اومدن قوانین در سازمان ملل تولید کردن، مثل اینترپل، یه پلیس تولید کردن. پس ما ریاست‌ها این همه هزینه کردیم تو صفحه مدیا ما رو بستون. چرا؟ چون از یه جا فرمان میگرفت. از یه جا فرمان اومد که 140 تا کشور اون 5 دقیقه حسینی رو حذف کنید. همه حذف کرد. بعد اومدن قوانینی رو نوشتن که خیلی مهمه. تو این قوانین نوشتن که هر حرکتی علیه ظالم، علیه دیکتاتور، علیه حکومت انجام بشه میگیریم. گفتیم خب ببخشید ما در چالش هامون توی ایران نه حیوان مرد، نه انسان مرد و نه درخت، ما هیچ کاری نکردیم. گفتیم خشونت توشه. لیدر ریاست گفت چه بلایی سر مردم ترکیه خواهد اومد و عراق دوم میشن که دارن میشن و گفت چگونه عراق دوم میشن. اینا رو توضیح بگم. بزرگترین ایراده دولت آمریکا، این خود کشور آمریکا، اینه که هنوز نمیفهمید که ما خبرنگار مستقل نداریم. خبرنگار مستقل یک دروغ بزرگ جامعه جهانی برای تپاندن اخبار دروغین به مردم جهانه. رسانه‌ای که پولش از هر جا میاد این مستقل نیست. تو بازار جهانی شما میخواید شکر بفروشید تو طویله، نه ایران، یه طویله دیگه انتخاب کن، یه کشور دیگه انتخاب کن، برو 2 تن شکر ببر تو بازار بفروش. 20 تا سازمان امنیتی میرسن یه چیزی میکنن تو سرت هم میبرن. شکر فروشی مستقل نداریم و خبرنگار مستقل داریم، رسانه مستقل داریم، حزب مستقل داریم، فیسبوک مستقل داریم. و من یه آدمی نیستم که گول بخورم. یعنی شما وقتی که پرچم سفیدتو به عنوان صلح میاری بالا، من میام بالا سرت، قبول نمیکنم، استاپ میکنم، میام بالا سرت، اسلحه‌تو چک میکنم. اگر توش گلوله باشه میبخشم، اما که توش گلوله نباشه میکشم، چون تو تا آخرین گلولت چلیک داری. هر وقت میخوام حرف نزنم 2 تا گزینه جلوی چشم میاد: شأنمو حفظ کنم، یا اگر راجع به این آدما حرف نزنم اینها در 98 آبان ماه فراخوان میگن بچه 17 ساله میمونه، بچه 17 ساله گول این احمقا میخوره میاد بیرون. از این میترسم که این بچه وسط خیابون بمیره، تو دلم میگم تو شأنت حفظ کردی.
از تاریخ و سیاست گرفت.
From history to politics, Restart Leader is restarting all concepts and branches of thought.
گروه‌های دینی که ما شما رو دوست داریم در امپراتوریش هم آزاد، مگر اینکه در پشت پرده. مگه نمیگید ما دینی هستیم و دعوی دین سیاست؟ مگه نمیگید؟ من لا سیاست نبینم.
In several programs, he addressed the Jews as his main audience. Because in Jews' ancient history, although short and local, they experienced aristocratic governments, such as Joseph, David, Solomon eras.
البته
The audience of Restart Leader was not only Jews. Actually, he presented his message to all religions through the context of the same religions.
Restart Leader presented information that shook the foundation of his audience's thinking in a way that was not easy to believe for a large portion of them. He always asked his audience to research for themselves rather than relying only on what he said. Using this method, he motivated the audience to create and strengthen the spirit of inquiry and fair criticism. For many scholarly audiences, Restart Leader's words began their never-ending quest. Every issue he raised was like a key to the unspoken topics in science, mysticism, history, and religion. Through every research, the audience became more aware of the validity of what he said on that topic. One of the interesting points for the audience was that in all scientific mystical programs of Restart, he humbly acknowledged that these words do not belong to him, and all citations are from the Sufis and great mystics. Undoubtedly, these programs are masterpieces in Persian history, as they prove that after a few thousand years, we are witnessing the return of philosophy from west to east. The philosophy that Persians themselves passed to the Greek culture, And this return is the rise of the promised Utopia.
در طول تاریخ
Throughout history, mankind has always waited for the emergence of Utopia. Aristocracy requires all three sides to exist simultaneously: the emperor, the Sufi, and the constitution. But in history, we have always seen that only one or two of these components existed, not all of them. And if all three of them existed, they did not appear together simultaneously and in the same region.
پس هر کی در سیاست جهان هست بدون اجازه آریستوکراسی، قانون افلاطون، سقراط، مدینه فاضله تفکری، بدون فهمیدن قوانین حقوق بشر میخواد به حکومت برسه، حتما بی‌ناموسه. خوشو برتر میدونیم، خوشو بالاتر میدونیم. ما اول باید به مردم آگاهی بدیم، سطح تفکرشون رو ببریم بالا تا ظرف امپراتوری کوروش این مردم اندیشه سیاسیشون در این ظرف جا بشه. آریستوکراسی یعنی برآیند فهم آدما ز بالا باشند و بالا برند. فرق اپوزیسیون یسار با تمام گروه‌های سیاسی در جهان اینه که ما 4 تا قوه داریم. قوه چهارم چیه؟ از همه جهان مقننه دارن، مجریه دارن و قضاییه. ما یه قوه دیگه داریم به نام قوه مردم. سقراط گفت آقا مردم، حکومتی رو که من دارم معرفی میکنم و من موضوع رو فهمیدم دارم واسه شما تشریح میکنم و توضیح میدم، حکومتی است که فقط در آینده یه نفر دیگه راجبش حرف میزنه، اونم سید محمد حسینی، لیدر ریاست. بقیه هیچ نیست. حسینی است که بعدها لیدر ریاست تشریح میکنه برای جهانیان که آریستوکراسی میشه. و فقط در کل زمین منم راجب این حرف میزنم. 2 تا گزینه دارید مردم: یا باید سقراط رو بکشیم، هر حکومت در پیتی میخوایم بیاریم، آخرش میشین همین که هست، یا به سقراط باید خواهش کنید بیاد نوع حکومتش رو توضیح بده و بنا بذاره.
Thousands of years ago, the world was in great turmoil, and the Persians built the world's first quasi-utopia by Cyrus II. It seems this task has once again been placed on the shoulders of Persians to establish the promised utopia, this time by a wise leader. Now, after a few thousand years, it looks like all components of aristocratic government have come together again. The question that future generations will ask us will be, did you, the people at the time, want this utopia? Undoubtedly, history will answer this question as well.
از پارس تا اسکندریه.
From Persepolis to Alexandria, the world has witnessed the emergence of quasi-utopias based on Persian mysticism. When we walk on the path of thinking, we will surely encounter this dilemma. What is the difference between the true world and the real world? The truth is that the world is waiting for an aristocratic government with all three components of utopia. But the fact is that, is the world ready for the savior who establishes an aristocratic government? Thousands of years ago, a lottery was drawn in the name of the Persians to form the world's first quasi-utopia. It seems that the world is waiting for the Persians to establish the promised utopia again. That means the rule of the aristocracy, or Persian philosopher kingdom.
فهمیدن یک دغدغه است، ولی دغدغه فهمیدن خیلی مهمتر از فهمیدن است. من پایه‌های سلطنت خود را بر ایلام، سرزمین پارس، بنا خواهم کرد و شاهان و شاهزادگان دروغین را از بین خواهم برد. چنین گفت خداوند. اما آن روز خواهد رسید که بگویند من ایلام، سرزمین پارس اسیر شده را به دست خواهم آورد. چنین گفت خداوند. کتاب ارمیای نبی.